What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode of MOONSHOT Monday. Today I'm going to pitch why Amazon should spin off its cloud computing division, AWS. Founded in 2006, Amazon Web Services has taken the enterprise computing world by storm. The business operates warehouses around the globe, stacked to the rim with servers, and allows you to rent them out online. This took out many of the pain points and costs and most difficult aspects of setting up your own server and getting online as a business. Now, AWS is quickly layering on top more and more services on top of this core competency, and it's one of the most exciting companies in all of enterprise software. As a standalone entity, it's rumored that AWS could be worth between 160 to 240 billion, and I think spinning it off could unlock a ton of value for Amazon shareholders and in fact accelerate AWS's growth plans and accelerate the retail ambitions of Amazon's core e-commerce business. If you take a look at these numbers, you can tell why AWS has garnered so much excitement among the analyst community. In the past 3 years, revenue has tripled from $1 billion a quarter to over $4 billion a quarter. In that same time, operating earnings have gone from $100,000 to $900,000 per quarter. This is the most profitable part of Amazon's business. It's growing faster than any other piece of Amazon's business. Although you may know it or not, AWS is the backbone of many of the most popular services on the internet today. Snapchat, Netflix. Fashion companies like Nordstrom have gone all in on the Amazon cloud to store all of their data and help with their own e-commerce ambitions. But although this sounds incredible, it's also causing the company to run into roadblocks. Wal-Mart, in fact, just put out a policy that said any of its vendors need to switch and stop using AWS because they're worried that Amazon's going to be looking at the data through its AWS division and using that into its retail division and getting an advantage over Walmart. Additionally, Target just announced that it was moving off of AWS because of similar competitive concerns. This is a trend that's only going to get more and more prevalent as AWS continues to dominate and get more ubiquitous. As Amazon's e-commerce ambitions scale and retail ambitions scale, and everybody's using AWS, more and more conflict of interest are going to arise. That is why I think it's an excellent move to spin out AWS as its own entity and relieve a bunch of these concerns. Additionally, a spin out of the AWS division could unlock billions in value for Amazon shareholders. If you take a look at these projections, I'm estimating that AWS is on pace to do $17.5 billion in revenue this year, over $4 billion in profits, scaling in 2018 to $24 billion in revenue and $5.5 billion in operating income. AWS is doing over 20% operating margins relative to Amazon as a whole, which is doing under 2%. This is an incredibly profitable business. Unlocking it as a standalone company could make the market realize the value of potentially the most valuable enterprise software or business asset in the entire world. Trends like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and the continued proliferation of video on smartphone are just creating an absurd growth in the demand for data centers and cloud computing that is here to stay. If we say that AWS gets spun out at a $100 billion valuation, I would argue that would be incredibly cheap. They would only be valued at 4.2x price sales and about 18 times earnings. Remember, this is a business that's growing over 40% on its top line and has potential to continue to grow in the double digits for years to come. If we plug in these numbers at a $150 billion valuation, the stock still doesn't look that expensive. Only about 6.3 times 2018 sales and 27 times 2018 earnings. So this is how you can see if we start to extrapolate AWS's growth into 2019 and to 2020, you can start to justify a valuation even north of $150 billion. Right now, at about $960 a share, Amazon as a whole is only valued at $460 billion. So it's estimated that AWS is currently valued at about a third of Amazon's entire market cap and potentially half of their entire market cap if you assume some aggressive growth projections. So how would the spinoff work and why would it create value? My guess is that if Amazon is able to spin off AWS at about $150 billion valuation, it would sell about 25% on an IPO. This means that Amazon will be able to raise $38 billion in its pocket for selling a quarter of AWS. With $150 billion AWS and Amazon's core retail business with $38 billion in cash, you now have two entities that are separate. Although in theory they should have the same market value as when they were together, that's not what happens in practice. The market often gives a much bigger premium to these companies when they're standing alone. And I would argue that premium could really be justified in this case because there's such a headwind on AWS's business because they're attached to Amazon. If they were a standalone company, they wouldn't have as many issues with Walmart and Target and all these retailers who now want to leave. The spinoff could in fact accelerate the growth of AWS as these competitor concerns die down. Additionally, with all of that $38 billion in cash, Amazon's retail business can turbocharge the growth of Whole Foods, open hundreds more stores, continue to go with their pricing strategy of really cheap avocados and salmon. Additionally, we made a couple episodes about Amazon potentially buying a fashion retailer to accelerate the growth of its apparel business. This would give them enough cash to do that, as two standalone companies, they'd both get a higher premium valuation in the market, and they'd both be growing a lot faster because of the reasons I mentioned. So I'm pitching that Amazon spins off its cloud computing division, AWS, as a standalone company, uses that money to turbocharge Whole Foods, to buy a fashion company, and take over the world a little bit faster. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. That's HyperChange. Peace.